Hi everyone, welcome back. In this video we're going to recreate the skeleton that we can see here, this sample skeleton that we've got in our can. What we're going to do is recreate something along these lines. Might not end up being exactly the same, but it's going to be close enough. So we're going to take a very quick look at the skeleton, and then what we're going to do is recreate it. So you can see here basically we have a root joint just here. I'm going to hold shift and expand this out in the outliner so we can kind of you can see which bits are selected. So we've got this root joint here in the middle. This is usually in a human character, this would be sort of close to maybe the belly button area, or maybe sort of the pelvis, and normally would sit sort of near the bottom of the spine. And between the hips. We've got several spine joints, which you can see here, running up. Now, the more spine joints you put in, the more accurate of a bend potentially you might get. But once you get to about this number of spine joints, which is 6, you're probably not going to see much of an improvement in the deformation. With a character like this. So if you only had maybe 3, you might not get as much as much control or as nice a bend, and going sort of beyond 6, I would say, is probably a bit of overkill. So we're going to ballpark for about 6 spine characters. Keep in mind as well, we've got this little joint here, which is because it's not a human, I've got this little body joint, and this is basically what the arms connect to. So I've got a root joint, a body joint, and then basically these joints up the top, I've named them spine, even though they're kind of more like in the character's head. The character, sort of, his face is going to be down here somewhere, which means sort of the rest of this is all just like a big long head. But you know, we're naming them in a way that you know, we can kind of understand them. We have a shoulder joint, elbow joint, wrist joint. We've got a hand joint which sits right in the middle of a hand, just here, and then we have our finger joints that branch off those. So each of the finger joints essentially is what we do is create one finger, and then we can duplicate that finger, and for each of the digits that we need. And when we duplicate a finger, it will actually, the duplicate will also be connected to the hand joint as we duplicate it, so it speeds the process up. Thumb, keep in mind with a thumb, it has one less joint than a finger. Okay, with a finger you've got 1, 2, 3 knuckles. With the thumb, you only have 2 knuckles. Okay, we're ignoring the fingertips in that count as well. So you can see there, 3 knuckles for a finger, 2 for a thumb. With the feet, or the legs, we've got a hip joint, a knee joint, an ankle joint, and then we also have a ball or a foot joint and a toe joint as well. So you can see I've named them ankle, foot, toe. Obviously we've got left and right. I'll show you how to quickly duplicate those, and also I'm going to show you how to kind of rename things very quickly as well, from one side of the body to the other. When we're doing that mirroring process, there's a nice option available. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to actually start building our skeleton. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get this existing skeleton out of the way. What we're going to do is rebuild it, so you're not going to use this skeleton. And so that I know you're not using this skeleton, we're going to actually rename all the joints in this existing sample skeleton. Don't panic just yet. You're not going to have to manually rename every single one of these. What we're going to do is use a tool which allows us to set a particular type of text to search for, and then have that replaced with an alternate text. So what we're going to do is select the skeleton root joint just here, and we're going to come up to modify, and then down to search and replace names. And what we want to do is type in JNT in capitals. What this is doing is it's looking for this JNT tag that I've placed onto the end of each joint name. Okay, this abbreviation for joint, JNT. So what we're going to do is we're going to type that in exactly as it's typed here, JNT in capitals, and then what we're going to do is replace it with the word sample. You could also replace it with the word demo, which might be suitable as well, just so that we can see which joints are my originals and which are the joints that you are creating. If we leave this as it is, when you start renaming your joints, it's going to start adding numbers on the ends. Because if we name them in a similar fashion to this, any name that we've already typed in is going to add automatically a number. Maya will not allow this multiple objects to have the same name in the same scene, so it automatically numbers them so that you can tell the difference between the duplicates. Okay, so what we're going to do, joint and sample, and what we're going to do is select hierarchy. Now, technically speaking, we might be able to hit selected, but because we've only actually selected the root joint, we haven't we haven't shift clicked on multiples. We've just got the root joint. We want it to tell it to look in the hierarchy, so it's going to look at anything connected to the root joints. It's going to go all the way down through these. If we went through and selected every single joint individually, using the shift key, we could hit selected. Technically, we could also possibly select all, but that would maybe apply it to everything in the scene. It's probably not a good habit to use that, because if you've got scenes with multiple characters in and they have similar names, if you've got the kind of suffix J and T at the end of all the names for your joints for all your different characters, it's going to rename all of them as well. So hierarchy is the best one. So when you've got those typed in, just press replace, and it will change all of those joints to, say, sample. Just run down and double check that there aren't any missing. Occasionally I might forget to change the name on a joint, especially if it's one that I've added later on. And so sometimes there might be like joint 1 or something in there hidden away. That looks pretty good. Okay. So later on, when we start building our joints and we're renaming them, we'll be able to rename them properly using JNT, and we're not going to get them mixed up with these ones. Okay. So what we're now going to do is move this skeleton out of the way. So I'm going to grab my move tool, and we're going to just drag this off to the side. And I'm also going to drag this backwards a little bit. The reason for that is if I leave it just sitting to the side, it'll still be kind of in the side view, overlapping with our model. And we don't necessarily want that. It's going to get in the way. So we're also going to push it backwards. So you can always get, sort of get over here and take a look, at the structure of the joints over here, if you need to. Okay, as a reference. And we will pop back to this from time to time. Now, just so we can kind of lock it down and control it a little more easily, with the root joint still selected, I'm going to come to the channel box, and I'm going to come down to the layer panel at the bottom here, and I'm going to use this last icon on the right, create new layer, and assign a selected object. It'll take these, put them in a new layer like this. What we can do here is double click the name and change this to sample underscore JNTS, sample joints. And what we can do here, display type, what I might do is set this to template for now and press save. What that's going to do is it's going to lock the layer so that I cannot select it, and it's going to partially grey the layer out as well. So it's a bit like a ghost. So I can still come over here and have a look at it like this, but I can't do anything to it. If I want to be able to select this again, I need to come down to the layer and press this little T button once for reference. That way I can actually kind of see it more solidly. If I click it again, it unlocks it, and I can then select it. Okay, but for now what we're going to do is just leave it on template. You can reference it if you like. Reference or template will lock it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is start creating a skeleton. What we're going to do is start by creating the spine. So we're going to run up here. So we're going to create the root joint first, then the body joint, and then several spine joints or head joints. Then we're going to come down and do the legs, and then we're going to do the arms, and then we're going to mirror everything across. There will be some other options in there that we need to do as well, such as making sure that the joints are lining up properly. Okay, so select your can, press F, and what we're going to do is let's go into the front view for this. Okay, make sure it's the front view and not the side view. Okay, now I don't have my names showing for my my viewports here. So what I'm going to do is just come up to the display, heads up display, and what I want is camera names just here. I'm going to click on that. Oops. There we go. And that's going to show me top, front, perspective, and side. Okay. That setting may save across with the file to your computer, opening this file up. So that's how you fix that. All right, front view. I'm going to tap the spacebar and zoom into the front view. If you select the can and press F, it'll center it and zoom in. And what we're going to do is we're going to switch on our X-ray joints just here. And what we're going to do is come up to the top left corner. We're going to set our menu set to rigging, and we can also pop across to the rigging tab as well. So that way we can get into things like the bind skin and skeleton orient joints and things like that. But we can also quickly get to the joint tool or the IK tool from here. So what we're going to do is start off by selecting the create joints just here. I'm going to click on that. And I also want to be able to see, I kind of want to be able to see the lines on my can. So I'm going to click this little wireframe on shaded button as well, so I can see those lines. And what else? I might also click the X-ray button as well. That way I can see the grid a little bit through there. The grid's less important to see, but sometimes it can help. Okay, so first thing I want to do is create a pelvis joint. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place that down the bottom of the can in this area. I can see where the legs are sticking up, and I can also see where the dome at the bottom of the can is. That's the bottom of the can that's been, kind of pushed up. What I want to do is go just above the dome and in between the legs. So it's going to be about here. And I'm going to click as close to this middle line as I can get it. It doesn't matter if it's not exact. So I'm just going to left click once. And you can see here it calls it joint 1. Then I'm going to move up a little bit and I'm going to click. Basically a good spot to click here might be right on this this intersection of these edges, in between the arms and above the pelvis joint or the root joint. So I'm going to click again. So that's our pelvis or a root joint. That's our body joint. And now what I want to do is create the head joints that run up through the middle of the can. And it's probably, for this I would say it's a good idea to follow the segments or the divisions here running up the can. So I'm going to pop one here, and this is just level with this horizontal line. Another one here, another one here, another one here. I'm going to do a couple more, but before I do that, I'm going to show you how to edit a joint if you kind of put one in the wrong spot. When a joint is active and I've still got the tool switched on, okay, if I middle mouse click once, it'll pop these arrows up, and then I can use the middle mouse button to readjust the position. Okay, just like the move tool. Like that. Now, let's say I get to this point and I want to add a joint. If I left click and drag, it lets me position the joint like this. So I can kind of left click and drag off a spot and then bring it back. Like this. Okay, as long as I don't release the joint, I can adjust the position like this. Okay. As soon as I let go of the mouse button, it locks that position in unless I middle click, and then I can use the arrow again. So I'm going to place another one on here, and then I'm going to do one more just near the middle top of the can, sort of just below the ring pull. So we're still inside the can, but obviously we're no longer on the main segments. So I've got something like this, and what I'm going to do now is place one more joint just above the can up here somewhere. Okay, Now this joint is going to get deleted, but what it's going to do is it's going to ensure that the last joint that I'm going to keep, which is this one, is going to actually point in the right direction, in the same direction as the rest of these joints. Okay. Usually what will happen is the last joint you create will kind of flip sideways in Maya, and if it's a joint that you're going to end up using, you know, as a control for part of the rig, it does need to point usually in the same direction as everything else. So doing an extra one means that this one flips sideways and this one actually stays lined up. Okay, so now that I've got those joints in, what I'm going to do is rename them all before I do anything else. I'm going to rename them, then I'm going to line them up, and then I'm going to make sure they're oriented properly. Okay, now what we're going to do, go back down to the bottom, select the first one, and we're going to call this root or pelvis joint. Okay, so I'm just going to go root underscore JNT in capitals and press enter, like that. Over here, you can see if you shift click, you can expand them out and you can see them there. You can also rename them here. Sometimes this is quicker. Now, a shortcut to this is, because I know that I'm going to have underscore JNT at the end of every name, what I can do, if I double click on this, I can highlight underscore JNT and copy that with Control or Command C. And then when I go down to the next joint, I can just double click that, type in the name. This is going to be body, and then just hit Control or Command V. And then double click the next one, and so on. And you can see it just locks those in. So these joints here are just going to be called spine. Okay, now because we've got more than one spine joint, we need to add a number. So what I'm going to do is double click. I'm going to call this spine. And what we could do is put a number in now, or what we could do is put in underscore JNT and then put an underscore in the number. What I tend to do is number them first, like this, and then put joint in. What that'll do is keep them in order, alphabetically or numerically. Now because I've got this name and I'm going to keep repeating that and just changing the numbers, that's what I can do. So I'm just going to copy that number. I'm going to double click the next one, type that in or copy that in, and then just change the number to 2. Make sure to not press enter before you've changed the number, because what happens is it'll just give you the same name. Okay. You might find sometimes as well when you do that, if it's a different type of object, it'll also add a number on the end, which you don't want, because sometimes then it can kind of throw the order of things out a little bit. So all we're going to do is go through, change the number like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or however many joints you've added. 5, 6. Now I'm not going to name this last one because I'm going to delete that, pointless naming it. Okay. Now before I delete that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that these are all lined up. What I want them to be is lined up directly down the middle of the character, and just for neatness sake, I can also make these ones kind of line up vertically with these edges running across. So I'm going to select my object, select the move tool, and then I'm going to pop up to the top of the screen and switch on my snap to points. Technically you could use snap to grid, but you might find some of the vertical positioning you have to do is not lined up with the grid, it's actually lined up with points. So I'm going to hit snap to points. Okay, so all I want to do here is move this side to side so that it lines up with the middle, like this. And you'll see that because this is the root joint, everything else connects back down to this one. When I move this, everything moves. So what I'm doing here is just lining this bottom one up with the middle of the character. Okay, you have to start with the bottom. If you start with the top, and you line this up and you go down from the end of the chain back down to where we started, all of them will end up out of position again. You've got to start with the first joint and work your way in order of creation. So with this one, I'm going to go side to side, and then I'm going to go up and down just so it lines up with that edge. Same thing here, side to side, and then up and down. Sometimes you've got to waggle it just a little bit, side to side, and then up and down. Now you'll see that the lines, see here, they don't quite line up. Okay, they're still on a bit of a weird angle. We're going to fix that in a moment using the orient joint option. And that's basically just to make sure that when your joints rotate, they're going to all rotate in a straight line with each other. So if you imagine like your finger, when you curl your finger, all your joints rotate in the same direction in order to stop your finger kind of bending sideways. If any of these joints are a little bit out of alignment, you'll find that if you bend them all at the same time, they'll kind of corkscrew instead of curl. So they kind of go a bit sideways as well, and it looks wrong. And we'll just align this one at the top here. Oops. Now you'll see that there, because I dragged up and down, it's jumped down to the first or the closest point on the model. So with this one, I just want to go side to side. Okay. So now what we want to do is we're going to take a look. I'm going to tap my space bar, tap it again over in the perspective view, and I'm going to select my joints here. So you can see these red, green, and blue axis lines on each joint. Each joint has its own, and you can see that this blue joint, the Z-axis for the root joint, is pointing backwards, but the body joint is pointing forwards. And then this one's backwards, and then this one's forwards, and then that's backwards, that's forwards, and that's forwards, right? So they're a bit random. There's a few in there that are the wrong way round. What we're going to do is orient the joints so that they're all the same. The one at the top will probably not work though, and that's, you know, as I said, we're going to delete that. So we select the bottom joint, we go up to skeleton, orient joint, and we're going to select the options like this. Okay, so these are the settings I usually use. Okay, the primary axis is the axis along the joint, going from one joint to the next, and you can see that's set to, that's going to be X, and currently it is X. The red one is pointing from one joint to the next. The secondary axis is Y, and this is the one that's out the side. Okay, but you can see here that they're sort of randomly flipped. So this one's to the right, this one's to the left, and so on. Okay, the secondary world orientation is going to be the Z-axis, and that's either pointing forwards or backwards. What we want to do is orient the children of the selected joint. The selected joint is this one. This is the one we've clicked, root joint. So orient children of selected joints is going to orient all of these other ones to match the root joint. Okay. Now what you can do is this button here, just so you can see it, is toggle local axis visibility. If you hold shift and select each joint and then click this, it'll display the actual axis for each of the joints to make it a little easier for you to see. In order to turn that off, you've got to select the joint and click the button again. Okay, so what I'm going to do is make sure I've got these settings set like this, and I'm going to press apply. Okay, and then what we should see is all of those joints should now match up, with the exception of maybe the one right at the top, which is joint 9. So you can see red is up, green is forward, blue is sideways. So if we take a look at all of them, they're all lined up the same way, and even the one at the top. Okay, so I know that all of those joints are now aligned. Now just to show you what that's going to do, if I shift select all of these joints like this, and then use the rotate tool, when I drag the rotate tool, you can see that the character kind of bends like that or curls. If those orientations are not set up properly, it won't do that very neatly, and you might find that some of them actually go completely the wrong direction. Before the orientation, what would have happened is the ones that were pointing with the blue axis backwards would have gone backwards, and the other ones would have bent forward. So they would have kind of zigzagged and done something a bit weird. Okay, so now I'm going to select the joint at the top. I'm going to delete that. And that leaves us with our skeleton for our spine. We can close off the orientation settings like that. Okay, so we're going to leave this here. Don't forget to save your file. I'm going to do a save as, so I'm going to go File, Save Scene As, and I'm going to give this a version number. So I'm going to go _001 at the end, and I'm going to save that. So don't forget to keep saving your file. In the next video, what we're going to do is create the arms and the legs, similar to what we've got over here. So I will see you then.